after Dr. Rubik's talk tonight, she'll be taking questions. Um, and then she will have a workshop on June 11th. That's Thursday at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific. And her topics are going to be about Wi-Fi, 5G, and our overall energetic health. Um, so please be sure to sign up. The sign-in information is on the webpage. And if you have any challenges with your video, you're welcome to watch live on YouTube. And the link is up in the chat, the very first thing in the chat. Okay? And the info on her workshop is also on the webpage. Okay, so that's enough housekeeping here. Now I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Rubik. Dr. Rubik is going to talk to us about the biofield and health and healing, or other things that are very, very interesting, I'm sure. She's has an earned PhD in biophysics from the University of California, Berkeley. She was a member of a program for a board on the alternative medicine at the National Institutes of Health. Everybody knows about the National Institutes of Health now because they're talking about that with COVID and what have you. She chaired panels on the electromagnetic medicine for the Institute for the National Institute of Health. She became the founder of the Institute for Frontier Science, where she does remarkable things, where she still works. Also, she serves as a consultant to the healthcare industry on Maverick Health and Wellness Project. That's kind of interesting title that you have, Maverick Health and Wellness. I assume it's some strange things. She's a professor of energy medicine she's a professor at the Energy Medicine University. She has 2 books and over 90 papers. So without any further talking, I will introduce Dr. Rubik, and thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Dick, and the American Society for Dowsers for inviting me. Now, I'm hearing a lot of feedback, and I'm on a microphone which is wired. Oh, that sounds better. Thank you. Anyway, I wish we could be together. I really regret that I'm here some thousands of miles away from New England, where some of you may be, and you may actually be all over the world. But unfortunately, we couldn't come together, but this is the best we can do. And I knew one of your founders quite well, Terry Ross. He was actually a good friend and colleague of mine. I lived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania for almost 10 years, where I was an administrator at Temple University. And I got to know him, and I knew of his amazing dowsing skills, but he also had amazing healing skills. And once my dog got very ill at age 12, I thought he was a goner. But Terry said, let me work on him. And he did this remotely. He sent my dog energy and cleared out demons and all sorts of amazing things that I heard about that he could do as a dowser and healer. And my dog recovered fully and lived another 5.5 years and passed away at 17.5. So here's to Terry Ross. I wish he were still on this plane. We could use more people like him. He was an amazing man. And anyway, you dowsers are amazing people with wonderful gifts. And today I'm going to talk about my work on the biofield. So let me start my screen sharing. Now let me see, application window. Let's see, I'm at this point where I should click this screen icon, but for some reason that's not happening. Okay. Do you see my first slide? Someone give me feedback, please. The biofield in health and healing. Is it there? Please. Well, I wish I...
Yes, Beverly.
Okay, thank you.
It's there,
Okay.
and put it into presentation mode, and it'll fill the whole screen.
Okay. I'm going to use it this way because sometimes it locks up during talks. So I'm going to talk about the biofield in health and healing and begin with the question of a field. You know, the notion of a field actually came from, I would say, ideas in agriculture, cornfields, etc. Physicists were trying to explain action at a distance. Of course, this is part of dowsing. It's part of energy healing and energy medicine. And here I've shown you a magnetic field from a simple bar magnet that's held under a piece of paper on which I've sprinkled some iron filings. And you can see the lines of force that show the connection between North and South Pole, that attractive force of a magnet. But there's a lot more to fields than just magnetism and electric fields. There's what are called electromagnetic fields, and these are the radiant energies that fill the universe. And here is the spectrum of them so far that science has elucidated, from very long waves. Beyond radio waves would be the earth waves, earth energies such as the Schumann resonance. And then we have the radio waves and the microwave region where we use for wireless communication, such as cell phones. And just above that would be the millimeter waves, which are going to be installed for 5G. And then infrared, which the human body emits about 100 watts of infrared. And going further up that spectrum, the very narrow range of visible light that we can see with our eyes, and also which we emit as biophotons, which I'll talk about today as well. And onward and upward, the invisible ultraviolet X-rays and gamma rays, the high energy, high frequency rays. So this is considered all of the electromagnetic rays that science has elucidated so far. I think there may be others, but most people would say that this science is complete. And we're going to talk about some of these today. And one thing about this spectrum is that organisms can sense extraordinarily small electromagnetic fields, and also small magnetic fields, and also small electric fields, and we can be influenced by them. Sometimes so very small, it's a decimal like this, 0.000, 12 zeros, 1, it would be picotesla, extraordinarily tiny fields. And people say, well, how do we do it? You know, we have an eye to see a single photon, but how is it we can sense such exquisitely small fields? I think it's because we have a biofield, which is also part of our sensing mechanism for low-level fields and probably involved somehow in the dowsing response. Especially when you're dowsing, I would say, the field of another organism, another person, but even water, because water is the essence of life. And I would suspect that your biofield may somehow know where water is. I mean, after all, every animal can find water. So dowsing may be the human's way of finding water, just as other animals have their own novel ways. So we can sense fields so very small that even when there's less signal than what we call the physical thermal noise limit, basically the molecular jitter due to thermal noise. That's how exquisitely sensitive we are to small fields. So I suspect that fields are involved in dowsing and that your biofield is part of the sensing mechanism. So let's move onward. The biofield was something that my team brought to the National Institutes of Health. I was on the panel of the Office of Alternative Medicine that began in 1992 at the NIH. It was mandated by Congress because a few congressmen got together who happened to have had cures from amazing alternative and complementary medicine. And they said, why is our National Institutes of Health not looking at this. More and more people are starting to use alternative therapies. So they actually made a law. And so the NIH has to make an Office of Alternative Medicine. And that office began. It was highly controversial because you can imagine the rest of NIH, which was focused mainly on the particles of life, the unraveling the DNA, the genes, the genome at that time, the Human Genome Project was in vogue. And of course, hand in hand with Big Pharma, the pharmaceutical approach to health and healing was the dominant paradigm. So the idea of energy healing or energy medicine was relegated to alternative, and it still is. So we were trying to map the various alternative and complementary medicines for the NIH because they didn't really know anything about it. And then we needed a concept to really bring in energy medicine. And we could have taken words from Oriental medicine, such as chi or prana from Ayurvedic medicine. And we looked back to the vital force and we said, you know, science dismissed that back in the 1600s. We can't bring it back. And so my team created the word biofield, and that stuck. We also made it an official medical subject heading term at the U.S. National Library of Medicine in 1996. Now, that was before Google was a search engine, just so you know. And it was very important for finding peer-reviewed papers and research on the biofield and on biofield therapies. So to make a long story short, the NIH accepted this term and then even did what's called a request for proposals on biofield therapies in 1999. And they hemmed and hawed, and then in 2000 there was a changing of the guard because there's always new personnel every time there's a presidential election in these offices. And so it wasn't until 2002 that NIH awarded just 4 center grants for so-called frontier medicine and biofield science. And my group, which was now in California Institute for Frontier Science, worked together with Gary Schwartz and his team at University of Arizona, and we received one of those 4 center grants to explore the biofield science. So the biofield was defined by my group, and I've probably taken it further in my own writing since. As the subtle energy body of life, it's really a dynamic complex of energy fields, both inside the body as well as around the body. So the aura, as people commonly call it, is just part of the biofield. The rest of the biofield is inside, and it's also governing the biomolecules and all of their chemical reactions and the physiology of the body. So I believe it's intimately connected with health and healing, and one of the first responses to energies from the environment. So what is the source of this field? Well, it's quite possible that one aspect of this is metaphysical and one aspect is physical. I can certainly give a case that all of the moving charges, the charged molecules, the ions, such as potassium and sodium and chloride, and all of the charged proteins and peptides and other biomolecules usually have an electric charge. And when they're in motion, they generate a magnetic field. And there are also radiant energies emitted from the body. So we could say that it all comes from the material body, but we could also say that maybe it doesn't all come from the material body. Maybe there's a metaphysical aspect. Maybe this is the blueprint of life at a higher dimensional order that is giving actual order to the molecular realm within our bodies. So there's probably some communication then between the physical body and the metaphysical realm with respect to this field. I also tend to think of it as the bridge between the body, the material body, and consciousness or the mind. So here's an artist's rendition of the biofield. This is courtesy of Alex Gray, the artist. AlexGray.com has done a number of artist renditions of the energy field of the human. And here you see some of the anatomy of the biofield. There are acupuncture points and meridians throughout the body. There are the chakras down the midline, starting at the crown, the third eye, the throat, the heart, solar plexus, etc. And there are the acupuncture meridians, which are actually 12 plus 2. There's a governing channel and a conception vessel. Governing channel up the back and conception vessel down the front of the body, and then 12 other meridians that are basically linking us between the heaven and the earth. And the idea from Oriental medicine is that we are between heaven and earth, and we are collecting energy from both those sources, and that is what runs us, the chi or the prana. There's also an energy envelope around the body. This might be considered the aura. And we also do radiate energy as far away as the boundaries of the universe. The biophotons, the radiant energy of electromagnetism comes out of us. So we really extend well beyond the skin to fill all of space with our biofield. Of course, the biofield is stronger when it's closer to the body, but it does extend throughout space. And we can speak about the quantum field entanglement of all beings because, and this was spoken of by Dr. Frank Brown, professor at Northwestern, almost 50 years ago. He said, no clear boundary exists between the organism's metabolically maintained electromagnetic field and those of its geophysical environment. In other words, our fields as humans are entangled, but we're also entangled with that of other organisms, of the earth, and anything else out there. And I would say technology that's emitting waves as well is impinging on our biofield and interacting and interfering with it. And that will be the subject of my workshop on 4G, 5G next week. I hope you'll come. So here's an example of that entanglement. Now, the Schumann wave is about 7 hertz. It's thought to be pumped up by lightning storms that are forever going on the Earth. And it's a wave that bounces between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere. And then there are also harmonics of this, such as 13 hertz and up to about 39 hertz. The harmonics are weaker, but the Schumann resonance, almost 8 hertz, is interestingly very similar to the alpha brainwave. That's the brainwave that we make when we're very relaxed, when we sit quietly, close our eyes, and enter into the ground state of consciousness. We recapitulate the Schumann wave, or perhaps we're paced by it, or perhaps we are one with it. Perhaps we're in sync with Earth when we engage in that kind of meditative concentration. So that's an example of the entanglement. And I do believe that we are paced by various geocosmic fields around us. But of course, then we have so much noise from the artificial environment that we've created as humans, especially in recent decades with wireless technology. And I'll have a lot more to say about that during my workshop. So here is my biofield hypothesis. I first gave voice to this, it was 18 years ago in a journal, and then later working with some others in 2015, we extended it. I consider the biofield of the human or any organism to consist of electromagnetic and more subtle fields. I don't believe that electromagnetism is the bottom line, that there's something more, and my laboratory has been exploring that, both inside and around our bodies. And that this complex dynamic field conveys vital information throughout our body. It may be the thing that is tying everything together from instant to instant. And that by that I mean central to its integration. I hypothesize that it's the super regulator of all of the biochemistry and physiology of the body. And why do we need this? Well, after the Human Genome Project, we learned that we have less genes than a grain of rice, about 20,000 genes, and that there were many organisms that had more complex genomes than humans. So it seems to me that the genetic view of life is limited, and we need to go with it, an energy view of life. We need the particle wave complementarity. The particle view is the conventional biochemistry, molecular biology that is the subject of most science in biology and medicine. But along with that, we need a wave view of life. That is the biofield view. And together they work to integrate the organism. I consider the biofield nature's original wireless communication system. And when I gave voice to that in 2002, nobody knew what I was talking about yet. But today, I think everybody understands that, as most of us are using some form of wireless. So let's take a look at the biofield as a complex dynamic standing wave. Oops, excuse me, I skipped some slides. So the concept of a standing wave, it's used in music. Musical instruments create standing waves that then vibrate with the container of the instrument, whether it be a violin or a clarinet. The standing wave shows features of antinodes, which are regions of high vibrations, and nodes, which are still points. So we have a string that's on a violin that's bound at this end and bound at the other end of a node, and it only has so many ways it can vibrate and make sound. And in the same way, Schumann resonance, here we go, is bouncing between the ionosphere and the Earth's surface and is pumped by lightning, is basically creating these standing waves. And we are bathed in those natural Earth frequencies and evolved with them. So one prediction I make from the biofield hypothesis is that if we make a change in the biofield, that will precede a cascade of changes in the physiology and biochemistry of the body. And if we make a healthy change in the biofield, we can actually jumpstart healing if someone is sick. And if we make a negative change in the biofield, for example, from a stressor, from electromagnetic stress or financial stress or any kind of stress, the biofield takes a toll, then the biofield is maybe off balance, no longer right-left balance, has shrunk energetically, and I'll show you some examples later on. We're on the road toward disease if we hold a pattern that is less than healthy. So the biofield then can reveal our status with respect to health, healing, and disease. There's a conductor for this so-called electromagnetic symphony, and as I said earlier, it's the mind. It's our intention, our awareness, emotions, our consciousness, and the biofield is therefore the bridge between the mind and the body. And that all comes from 5,000-year-old Oriental medicine. Where the mind goes, the qi, the subtle energy, according to Chinese medicine, flows. And the blood follows the qi. So the mind is the commander of the qi. And the qi then flows. And the flesh and blood are slow to change, but they do follow the qi. And this is how qigong works. You put intention into moving energy around the body and increase the energy flow and improve it. So now I'd like to talk about some ways that we assess or measure the biofield at my laboratory, Institute for Frontier Science. We actually use 4 methods, and I'm going to talk about 3 of them. I think you'll be more interested in these. The first one I'll speak about is a bacterial growth assay for biofield therapies that I actually developed with part of that NIH funding for the Frontier Medicine and Biofield Science grant. There's also acupuncture meridian conductivity, which I will not address today, but there are many machines out there that will tell you how your acupunctures are conducting electricity, and they're pretty much applied by practitioners who are then treating people with electrotherapy or homeopathics. Then there's biophoton counting, which I will speak about. We use that in our lab. And also high voltage electrophotography, which was derived from the old Kirlian photography, has been modernized and digitized. So let me begin by summarizing my bacterial growth bioassay for biofield therapies. Biofield therapies, by the way, are practices that include therapeutic touch, healing touch, Reiki. Um, Practitioners who do this are called biofield practitioners, and they generally go through an attunement, an initiation process, or a study with a master. And they are channeling universal life energy basically through their hands, through their intention, and letting it flow into the bodies of a needy patient or client. And the chi or the prana goes where it needs to go for the highest good. That's the idea. So in this study, we're studying Reiki, which is one of the common forms of biofield therapy that actually came from Japan, from a Buddhist monk lineage, and was brought, it's particularly common on the west coast of the United States, whereas therapeutic touch, which was founded by Dolores Krieger and Dora Kunz, and they were in New York City. So therapeutic touch is more common on the East Coast and also in the nursing community in particular, because Dolores Krieger was a professor of nursing. In any case, Reiki has 3 levels, Reiki level 1, 2, and then Masters of Reiki. So I brought Reiki practitioners that were of this Usui lineage, the standard lineage, to my laboratory by appointment. They treated bacterial cultures, and they placed their hands on a box containing the bacterial cultures and test tubes. There was no tissue heating. We were sure that the distance was far enough from the bacteria that that was not what was going on. And they sent Reiki to these cells, which had been heat shocked. They had been damaged by moving the temperature of the bacteria to 57 degrees centigrade when they like to be at body temperature, which is 37 degrees centigrade. And this was the ubiquitous E. coli that lives in our colons. It's about 2.5 pounds of our microbiome. And so in my study, healers came in by appointment, 1 or 2 a day, and did this treatment. And sometimes they also treated patients to create a healing context, because it's really an abstract thing to say, here you go, treat my bacteria, when people are used to treating persons. So we made sure that they had patients to treat, and then they turned their attention to the bacterial cultures. We processed the bacterial cultures and then plated them. We did what's called the standard plate count assay, and then we incubated them overnight at body temperature in an incubator. And the next day we counted the little colonies that showed up on the plates, and we did this counting objectively with an instrument that actually counts these colonies, because it's very tedious and the instrument is more objective. And we found this. We found that Reiki-treated cultures grew more than the controls, and the significance was p less than 0.05, which means it's statistically significant. That's important. The controls didn't get Reiki. They simply got the heat shock. And we didn't use an actor who tried to fake Reiki. I know some studies do things like that, but everybody has a biofield, and even actors who may be faking it may be sending energy to the bacteria. So I decided not to use that kind of control, but no treatment by Reiki. They simply sat around during those 15 minutes at room temperature. And so Reiki improved the growth of heat shock bacteria, bacteria that were damaged grew better than controls. And this suggests that biofield therapy is more than a placebo. And that's important because often conventional medicine dismisses a lot of these therapies as simply nothing more than the biology of belief operating between 2 persons, and they feel better after they do this hands-on or hands in the auric field. So my study shows that there really is a change at the level of cells, and there can be no placebo effect with bacterial cultures. So it's an important study. And there are other studies on Reiki and therapeutic touch. There are bodies of research that show that these modalities do in fact work. There is something coming from us that can help heal another organism, and it is not a matter of belief. It really works at the cellular level. So the next method of measuring the biofield is biophoton emission counting. And here we're going to count particles of light coming from the human body. Now, light is an enigma in physics. Sometimes it acts like a particle, sometimes like a wave. It has what we call Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde features, and it has a lot of metaphysical connections too. Light has been the symbol of divinity in virtually every religion or spirituality. And I think it may be a possible connection between multidimensional realms of being. So I'm quite interested in the biophoton emissions from the human body. And of course, a lot of the religious art shows halos of light around uh, those figures, east and west. It seems to be ubiquitous to all the cultures. Now, it's interesting that in the dominant scientific worldview, they don't regard the light coming from the human body as meaningful. It's considered junk, which is really surprising and anthropomorphic in my view, because I don't think anything coming out of a living thing is junk. Everything has a purpose and a meaning in the universe. Even our waste becomes food for another organism, etc. So we have another worldview that's emerging, the biophysical worldview, that biophotons, the light particles coming from living things, may be bioinformational. They may contain information. They may also help regulate our biology inside and maybe even regulate others. And they may be used in biocommunication between even people. What's interesting is that our face and our hands are the greatest emitters of our biophotons. And of course, that's how we communicate. And sad to say, when we're not in the presence of others, unfortunately, we're missing a lot of bandwidth. We're missing the biofield bandwidth. You can hear my voice and you can see an image of me, but you're missing this entire bandwidth of my biofield interacting with yours. And I regret that, but that's how it is. But that is part of human communication too. And there have been some previous biophoton studies on humans, particularly out of the Netherlands, and also Fritz Popp in Germany. Human hands emit a lot of light, and especially in the palms of the hands and the fingertips. Now, this may be important because some of you are using dowsing devices that you hold in the hands. I've often wondered, I don't think there's anything special personally about dowsing rods. All of them, in my view, are simply the needles, and you are the instrument. Your body, your being is the instrument, and the needle moves, but it's not the needle that's sensitive. It's you that are, and maybe there's some aspect involving biophotons here. So let's see what my studies revealed. In metaphysics, so this is art from the late 1890s from Theosophy. The psychics in that era already deduced that the palm of the hand was a special minor chakra, and that part of the wrist, which is known as inner gate in Oriental medicine, is another. And they saw the whorls of energy coming out of each finger and thumb like this. So that was their view. And it's interesting that our science, as you'll see, pretty much validated that view. So I think my initial study that we did on healers and clients, putting them in a box and measuring what's going on during healing, before, during, and after an energy healing with different types of energy healers, is one of the first of its kind. And here are the questions that we asked. Can we measure a change in biophoton emission from the hands of energy healers before and after energy therapy, from the hands of patients before and after energy therapy? And what about during the energy healing session itself? So that was our question. And here's the chamber that we built, because this has to be done in total darkness, because we're talking about counting individual photons coming from the human body. So everybody had to go in this box in order to be measured, and I, as the experimenter, went in with them. The interior of the box looked like this. There are 3 stools for us to sit on, and this is a dental lamp repurposed, holding the detector here. The reason we use this is because it can be moved around at any angle and it holds its position as we moved it to different parts of the human body during our experiments. So here's how I looked. I'm the one with the black mask on the right-hand side. We always wear black in there because we don't want stray light bouncing around, enhancing the photons coming from our bodies. So I'm blackening out my own biophotons. I have black gloves on and black head to toe. And my subject here is also wearing black, but I'm going to be measuring her forehead later on in an experiment. And the controls for this, Harry's working at them outside the box. Software and hardware that he put together, because you can't go out and purchase a biophoton measuring system. You have to do it custom and all yourself. So the first study that we did, we took 5 different energy healers or biofield practitioners and 5 pain patients. They were randomly paired. They didn't know one another. We wanted to pair them up our own way. And I went in the biophoton counting chamber with the practitioner and the patient because I had to move the probe around and measure the persons. So the subjects in the experiment arrived in the laboratory. They signed consent forms, demographic questionnaires. They went in the dark chamber with me. The door was shut. Harry monitored the data, and we communicated with him via a small microphone as to what was going on because sound was hard to hear. And I moved the detector around to different bodily regions of the subject's body to count photons. And, excuse me. So our healers were quite advanced. We had healers from age 43 to 78, some Qigong masters, some Reiki healers, some mixed modalities who had studied different types of healing and then evolved their own practices. And they were healers that practiced and did this for a living, actually, between 8 and over 40 years. And I asked them whether they thought their energy might be connected with light, and most of them thought perhaps or yes. I asked them, we also monitored heart rate variability, and then we looked at, on a scale from 1 to 10, relaxation, well-being, and satisfaction with the experiment afterwards. So here's just an example of one session. So as you can see, the detector has a certain amount of noise, a little bit, that's the bouncing around. And here we're measuring the palms of the healer, and we get a photon count rate in voltage. Later we convert this to photons per second per square inch after we calibrate the detector. The healer palms, in this case, are higher emitters than the patient palms, right and left. And during this healing session, there were 3 distinct peaks of energy that occurred. And then we measured the healer palms after healing and the patient palms once again. And what was fascinating about this session in particular, and all the sessions were energetically unique. This was about 20 minutes of healing. The healer remarked, as this peak occurred, that her guides had arrived that helped her in this healing process. So I thought that was significant, even if it's qualitative data. So this is a summary of all the experiments just to show you. The items in red are, I measured sword fingers. Now sword fingers, I'm going to just show you quickly in the next slide. Sword fingers are holding the hands like this. This is a Taoist mudra, and it's used, healers often can sense energy very well with these fingers. They send energy. They also use it as a sword to break up stagnant energy. And it turns out that for those that we measured the healer's sword fingers, those were the highest emitters of all the hands. The palms and other fingers, which are not all shown here. But it's interesting because this is also part of the ancient literature, that these are very special emitters of energy. And indeed, that's what the science shows. But we found that healer palms averaged here before and after healing. There was a little bit of change. Patient palms, all of them actually went down a little bit after healing. it's hard to say maybe we kept people too long in that box. When you're sitting in a dark chamber for about 45 minutes, you get quite disoriented when there's absolutely no light in the room. But we did get interesting patterns of healing, as I showed you here, during the healing session. Every session was unique, as you might expect. So this is another study we did, and this was on individual practitioners performing certain psychoenergetic exercises. And I'm quite intrigued with medical intuitives who can look at someone, be present with them, and maybe even scan their energy field and know what's wrong with them and say a diagnosis. And one such person came to us who said, I can open my and close my third eye. So we put her in the box, and that's, in fact, we found quite different emissions from her third eye region. Closed, 20 photons per second per square inch. Open, 41.2. It's double. And on another trial, it went from 17 to 27. So she seems to have volitional control of her third eye. And by the way, her right hand palm, her heart, and abdomen did not change at all during these exercises, only the third eye. So it shows extraordinary control using intention and will to shift the biofield and to have some super abilities like medical diagnosis. We had another advanced practitioner from the International Academy of Consciousness who is also a researcher, and they perform a certain exercise called voluntary energetic longitudinal oscillation. It's an energy exercise where they oscillate the energy down to the feet and to the top of the head and all the way up and down, and then they send the energy outward of the heart and also the hands. And so we measured his heart energy. In this case, we also showed data from the forehead. There's not really much change, -6%. The right palm, yes, 23% during the energy exercise. The left palm, not much significant change, but the heart region went up almost 300%. And this is a sending of love along with energy. So we were pretty excited about seeing such a dramatic shift in energy from the heart region, the heart chakra. So conclusions from this pilot study: various psychoenergetic exercises can alter biophoton emission, can alter the biofield from specific regions of the body, sometimes according to intention. So now I'm going to jump into another way that we measure the biofield, high voltage electrophotography. And this method is more accessible to you because there are commercial devices out there, and I'll mention one in case you're interested. This goes back to Kirlian photography that was invented in Russia, but we didn't know about it because it was during the Cold War until around the late 1970s. And then it came to us as film photography, Kirlian photography, which is rather cumbersome. But since the early 1990s, it was made digital. And one of those key figures is Dr. Konstantin Korotkov, who is a physicist and professor at St. Petersburg University. So he created digital electrophotography. It involves high voltage, high frequency, short impulse. It's not as shocking as the old film Kirlian, where you put your hand on a plate and you wish it weren't there because you get quite a zap. You don't feel anything with digital electrophotography. It's much lower level, and so we're not perturbing the human energy field that much. And it has modern ways of measuring photons with a charge coupled detector and wonderful software that the Russians have developed that does a parametric analysis of all the light patterns coming from the fingertips. So the device that I'm talking about in particular is called BioWell, and the website is www.bio-well.com. So it's a commercial product. And it does this electrophotography. It also has a lot of add-ons. I did, for example, a study of the total solar eclipse that came a couple of years ago. I traveled up to Oregon for that purpose and brought an accessory to the BioWell called the Sputnik, which measures the ambient energy of the environment, and we found actually that the ambient energy dropped precipitously during the total solar eclipse. Despite all of the enthusiastic people out there that were also at the same farmhouse where we were. And it was fascinating. And then I learned in Ayurveda, you should never expose yourself to a total solar eclipse. It's actually considered dangerous in the old Ayurvedic scriptures. So anyway, BioWell measures fingertips. It also can measure ambient subtle energies using accessories like Sputnik. It can measure the biofield also through an electrical conductive glove that is then attached to the instrument, where you can look at overall changes in the biofield over time. This one takes finger by finger, and you see, because it's a charged plate, a charged camera lens, we get a very large induced light emission. So this is different from biophotons, because there they were extremely low level. You could never see them like this. So this is an induced light emission because of the high voltage. But it also reveals information about the biofield. And here's, so you're touching a charged plate, and photons are coming out of the fingertip and also of the gases right around the finger, the moisture, the air. And the photons are going inside the device, which is then registering them in the charge coupled detector. And then that's conveyed to software and analyzed in a computer. So actually the detector sees only light or darkness, but the computer colorizes it according to intensity. And so here you see the 10 finger tip images from inserting one finger at a time. 1L is left thumb, 1R is right thumb, all the way to the little fingers. And ideally, when someone is healthy and well, one sees a virtual perfect circle of light around each fingertip, because according to Oriental medicine theory, when the body is healthy, there is the smooth, unimpeded flow of chi. And I think of it like the flame of life. And when the body, in this case, the little fingers don't look so good, they're not, there's gaps, and that means something in the analysis, as you'll see. The Russians studied many thousands of people over decades and performed sector analyses of these fingertip images. And then looking at some sick people, for example, they could figure out, what does a low thyroid look like? Well, it corresponds to a certain sector on one of these fingers, and then they made this composite biofield by piecing together these various sectors according to the various tissues and organs that are represented by the sector emissions. And this goes back to another modality called Korean hand therapy, or sujok, whereby the fingers represent various organs and tissues of the human body. Part of that is sujok and part of it is empirical. And then they get organ diagrams such as this, computed from the 10-finger data, and one can look at the left versus right. And in this case, you can see that they're not very well symmetrical, and that is an issue in this case. I'm going to show you now some example of composite biofields from BioWell assessment without doing a big analysis. But this is how a normal, healthy person would look: large and full and relatively evenly distributed without gaps or holes. This was my technician on 2 different days. Oh dear, sorry. This initial picture is him during a normal mood. And then he came to work one day and his dog had passed away. And it was a big blow. And you can see that he had not a clinical depression, but definitely a shrinkage of energy. But he was maintaining his energy signature with a large amount of energy in the back here and also in the heart region. But his energy shrunk overall, and it shows a depressed mood, not a clinically depressed, but depressed for a good reason. This is a yoga beginner, and people who begin practicing a modality, a mind-body practice, usually are not yet balanced, but immediately after about an hour of yoga, you can see that the biofield is much improved. And that's important. It shows that this practice was excellent, that this person's practice helped circulation in the legs and evened out left, right, expanded the biofield. This is a person who already practiced yoga for 20 years, but he does have a little bit of a back problem. And you can see his biofield is pretty smooth and regular. And one more yoga class doesn't really do a whole lot to him. He's already in the zone, as you can see from the pre-yoga picture. It just improves the energy flow in his back region, which is still suffering. So I did actually a pilot study on yoga, and I showed definitely yoga, and I did another one on qigong, and I didn't publish these, but after you do yoga, and if you do it correctly, and it's more about the breath and about relaxation than trying to achieve those asanas, those postures, that you achieve more perfect circles of light emitted from the fingertips, greater left-right balance, smoother, more regular light emission in the biowell, means improved energy regulation after performing yoga. And I found that beginners showed the greatest improvement, but I don't know if it held. Probably not. It holds for a while, and then they sink back. But that people who have practiced yoga or qigong for about 2 years regularly, say once a day or 4 times a week, then we're in a zone whereby one more class did not show much change. So it shows the virtue of a mind-body-spirit practice and how it can really shift the biofield and keep you in the zone. Here are some other examples. A patient before and after therapeutic touch, one of those biofield practices. You can see very clearly the left-right irregularity in this person before receiving therapeutic touch and how the field has become more uniform and a bit more expansive. And this is the Reiki master who looks before and after performing Reiki, and even looks a little better, a little more balanced, particularly in the major organs after performing Reiki. And healers often get healed in the act of healing others. They feel better, they feel more balanced and psychospiritually connected. Here's a beginner of Wild Goose Qigong, which is a Qigong practice for health, a woman, 57. You can see a rather irregular pattern of energy, as beginners typically have, and then following an hour of Qigong, a much improved biofield. Left-right balance, expanded energy, no holes. This is a fellow who had Parkinson's disease who was, in the same class practicing Qigong, because he said it really helped him with his Parkinson's disease, which is a disease of the nervous system of the brain and involves shaking, poor coordination. And you can see, interestingly, this secondary band associated with the head. And when I showed this to the Russians, because I never before encountered this, they suggested from their empirical data that this was a sign of demon possession. Well, of course, demon possession is one way of looking at an illness of the brain, another cultural view perhaps, but it was fascinating. I've never yet ever again seen a double emission like this over the head. But after practicing Qigong, the person looks quite healthy. And this is a man at 77 years old. It's very unusual to see big changes in the elderly after a mind-body practice too. This is me after I wrote the NIH grant proposal some years ago. I really looked an energetic wreck. We produced, in those years, it was all documents that needed to be mailed in. It was 4 inches thick of documents. It really was a lot of work, and brokenhearted and poor circulation in the legs. Then I gave myself electroacupuncture with a device that I purchased at a drugstore in Tokyo, where those are standard devices, household devices. And lo and behold, I looked pretty good and felt much better. So it shows you the power of energy medicine to improve the biofield. And if that pattern is held, and the body will heal. So, conclusions from biowealth testing: it's a useful tool for monitoring changes in the biofield, and it's a commercial device. You can purchase it. You can easily learn it. It's very good for ordinary folks as well as clinicians and researchers. And it can show you changes such as improved right-left balance, greater field density, and reduced variability, reduced standard deviation, suggesting positive changes in the human biofield. I just showed you a lot of pretty pictures, but there's a deep quantitative analysis of all of these that you can go very, very deep in the BioWell software, or you can just enjoy the photos that are produced. And smoother, more regular light emission patterns predict improved energy regulation and correlate with smoother, unimpeded flows of energy in principle. And that is the idea of health in Oriental medicine. And typically we found positive changes in the biofield after energy healing. Now, during my workshop next week, I'm going to show you just the opposite. What's happening with exposure to electromagnetic fields from technology and how that thwarts the biofield. The usefulness of BioWell, well, it just takes really a minute to assess a person. They stick one finger at a time, you press a button and get the photo and move on to the next finger. You do all 10 and then press another button and the software analysis opens up. And it can show you the effects of stressors in your lives. It can show you the effect of changes that you make through your own practices, whatever they may be. And the results are meaningful for practitioners and patients, so it's also useful for people who are holistic practitioners. And there's a lot of colorful graphics and charts, and one can save the reports or print them, and all the data is on the cloud in a permanent way, which is very helpful. So the conclusions thus far, I've shown you some 3 methods of biofield measurement. And each of them here have a certain level of scientific validation. I should mention that BioWell is considered a medical device in 30 countries, but not in the United States. It's considered a wellness device. It has a wellness device classification with the FDA, but it's also a validated scientific device. And I had 2 doctoral students complete doctoral dissertations studying persons using BioWell in part. One of them was looking at the effect of cognitive behavioral therapy, which is conventional psychotherapy, on person's biofield, and the other one was looking at the effect of aromatherapy on the biofield. So each of these devices or ways of looking really give a different window into the biofield. They're just literal windows. This is just the beginning of measuring the biofield, because I think the biofield is probably the most complicated field in the universe, the biofield of humans, unless there are more complex beings out there, which I don't have any direct knowledge of. But we always need more scientific validation using larger controlled studies, and the pitfall is funding is hard to get in this area. One of the things I've long wanted to do was to do the complementary thing to the Human Genome Project, which would be the Human Energy Project. I'd like to map the biofield. I'd like to join together with other scientists, and there are a number of us around the world who work in this area, but there's been no concerted effort to bring us together with a large amount of funding or a leadership organization that can administer that funding to really develop the Human Energy Project. But that is one of my aims, so I'm going to throw it out. It needs to happen. So one of the things we're doing at my laboratory in really pushing the cutting edge on this is to ask the question, does the human biofield contain subtle energy components? And I do think it does. And we set up a number of ways to try to measure qi, and we found some ways to detect it that involve some novel detectors. Here's one of our subjects hooked up by various detectors, galvanic skin response and perfusion index and heart rate variability on the other finger. And he's trying to influence some of our detectors here. And we have a detector for the magnetic field. We have a detector for alpha, beta, and gamma emission, radioactivities. We have temperature and humidity detectors. And then we have various subtle energy detectors that we're not going to reveal at this time because we're still trying to develop them as products. So that's where our research sits. We're looking for funding to take some of these detectors, which you see as a huge benchtop production, miniaturize them and make them useful for persons to study their own chi. One of the detectors that responds to chi from energy healers such as this person also responds to emotions in a novel way. It's we have a detector that can distinguish positive affect from negative affect, and it doesn't have to be placed on the body. And that's pretty interesting. And that means that there's some shift around in the energy field of a human being nearby them, say within 6 feet, that conveys positive energy or a certain energetic signature associated with love and joy and bliss. And when they're angry or fearful or other negative emotions, the needle moves the other way from our detectors. So we're pretty excited about that. We don't know anyone else who's developed detectors like this, and that's what my lab's been doing for the past 10 years. So here are some of our publications. I have a couple of websites, and you can find all of our recent publications on the websites, and I'm going to show you that last slide, including the one on the eclipse that might interest you in particular. So www.frontiersciences.org and www.brubik.com, and then you would go to publications from the home page. So that's it, and I look forward to your questions.
Okay. So while you're getting ready, Dr. Rubik, there have been a few questions early on, and one from Nancy. She wanted to know if the entanglement that you spoke about is like a symbiosis, symbiotic working together.
It can be. I mean, when people are friendly and there's a feeling of benefit going on, then I think there's a symbiosis. But if people are antagonistic, then the opposite. You know, we all know this experience. We know feeling vibes from others. We all understand that. Being in the room with a person who's got a negative attitude is not very uplifting. And then I would say that's not synergistic with us unless you too want to become angry or have become angry as a result of being in the presence of such a person. But yes, bioinformation is conveyed through the biofield, one to another.
Thank you. Maria asked, in the images of you after presenting your 4-page or 4-inch thick document, and before and after you took your electroacupuncture test, what was that? There was a streak over your head. There was a long streak. She wants to know what the streak was.
I didn't filter some of those images very well, and that was from the old days. Remember, that was so the early days before BioWell. There was a precursor device called the GDV camera, gas discharge visualization camera. And I think the software in those days did not have a filter apparatus, and some of it could be stray light. So we didn't pay much attention to these streaks way out there. That was back in 1993. So you see, it's really a long time ago. And that's the early days of, no, that actually was more like 1999. But still, it was the early days of digital electrophotography. Now it's much more perfected, and there are all kinds of filters that extraneous light.
Maria also asked, are there GoFundMe or from other public funding, or do you get all from grants to do your experimentation at the Institute?
Well, I haven't tried the GoFundMe situation. Most of that seems to be for products that people want, and I've thought, well, maybe we should do that for the subtle energy detector that we've created. But I don't really know how to go about it or which one would be most appropriate, so I've not done it. We mostly rely on individual philanthropy. The NIH, unfortunately, has stopped its program in biofield science and also energy medicine largely. Every time there's a presidential election, there's a new who now runs the National Center for, I guess it's now called Integrative Medicine, and in these things over some years, and I'm no longer an advisor. It's almost impossible to get federal grant money to explore these questions. You have to rely on private individuals, on philanthropists.
Thank you. Thank you. Barbara asks, I missed the how the analysis of the fingers gives us a whole body picture of your energy field.
The individual fingers give rise to a circle, a kind of pattern of light that, and each circle has a sector analysis. And underlying that sector analysis, where each sector is assigned to, I can actually open some software and show you this, and I'll go into it in more detail. Let's see. Share my screen. Now, I have to open it, but I will. Okay. So let's take a look at okay, this person is extremely well regulated. As you can see, it's probably the top of the line. And I'm going to show you the individual fingers here. Can you see this?
Yes. Yes, we can see that.
All right. Now here are the fingers and the various sectors that are labeled. And the sector analysis is done. And you're going to see, how did they get the sector analysis? Well, in part, they got it from Sujok. The third finger, the middle finger, often represents the head. So does the thumb in Korean hand therapy and Sujok, respectively. So neck ailments might be seen here, just at the bottom, the ventral part of the thumb. Can you see me move my mouse? I'm not sure.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm moving, this is the right middle finger, and I'm moving my mouse at what would be the neck, but also the thumb. This lower part of the thumb will also mean neck or throat. And because they studied so many people with so many disorders, they were able to map specific organs and tissues on these sectors. And then the energy field gets pieced together from the sectors. And here you can see, as I move my cursor around, right here, look at the bottom. It says left thumb, throat, larynx, trachea, thyroid gland. It's exactly what I told you. It's the bottom part of the thumb that is registered there. And they have other regions, the left little finger here, etc. So all of this was found empirically. So you see how they did the software. And it's really very complex software. There are elements where they go into all of the meridians, the yin of heart, the yin of lungs, and you see how the sectors, everything is fully revealed in this software, how the sector relates to this particular meridian that starts up here and ends in the thumb, and what fingers, sectors correspond to getting this value of energy along this yin-yang balance in this particular meridian. So the software reveals all algorithms. Nothing is um, proprietary as with some other systems that look at energy. This is one reason that this system is scientific and allowed, good for researchers as well as clinicians. It's completely told what exactly are they doing here. Whereas a lot of systems that are looking at human energy are often proprietary. You have no idea how they're getting the values on the screen that they come up with. And you may wonder, where are they coming from? They're never going to tell you. It's their trade secret. That's a problem in my view. I don't want to use instruments like that. I want something where I can go in and do a deeper analysis and understand it scientifically. So that makes this a scientific instrument as well as a useful clinical instrument.
Great, thank you, thank you. Very interesting. I was curious about that myself. So, one of the questions somebody said is, have you done any work on dowsers?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay.
I haven't done any work on dowsers. No. Sad to say, I got much more interested in energy healing, but I certainly am interested in dowsing, and I see it as definitely related to the biofield and to healing. And if funding were available, I would certainly make a study, but I don't even know of a source. Maybe your organization is one such source? That would be interesting.
If we can pay our rent, then we'll be able to maybe make a contribution to you.
Well, I'm a 501c3 nonprofit, so anybody who makes contributions to Institute for Frontier Science, it is tax deductible, as we are a bona fide nonprofit since 1997.
Thank you. Somebody RC asked a question about the theta wave, theta brain wave, and he specifically says, or she, have you ever done any research on the theta brain wave? And I assume that what you might have found with that.
No, I didn't do research on the theta. I did research on the gamma brainwave, and I published a paper on it. I think the link is on my website, but maybe that paper is not fully free to get because of copyright issues of journals that own them. But I published a study on 39 hertz, which is very high level brainwave. That's another interesting thing. Theta is sort of trance-like states, dream-like states. It's above delta, below alpha. And it's probably involved in active imagination, I can imagine. But I haven't studied it. But I have studied 39 hertz, which is gamma, beyond beta. And that's a realm of high creativity, the aha experience, and also certain meditators, not transcendental meditation, but some other kinds of meditation, some kinds of Buddhist meditation, who get into these very aware states.
Thank you. One of the things question I had, it's not on there, it's legit that I asked a question. When you're doing all your work with your biofields, obviously you're picking up biophotons and your black box testing area. What do you do with the? Do you have like a Faraday cage around your lab to keep electromagnetic stuff?
We don't have a Faraday cage there, because if we did, then we would prevent them from experiencing the natural earth fields. We do not have any wireless in our laboratory, though. Yes, I mean, I walk in with my smartphone, but I put it on airplane mode. Everything is wired, and we have maintained an extremely low level electromagnetic pollution. The Faraday cage is a debatable thing, because people sitting in a Faraday cage, they can feel strange, deprived of earth energy. So there are pluses and minuses about using a Faraday cage.
Thank you. Nancy asked a question. What is all an understanding of the biofield? How does that affect her as experiential value for a person in another part of the world. How is this important for somebody to understand this?
Well, I think the biofield is important because we want to, I would say, have a mind-body practice that will enhance our energy field. We want to recognize that we, in part, communicate through the energy field. There's an energy ecology that we should be considering, that we're emitting vibes or electromagnetic waves that are influencing everyone around us.
I see.
And I
Yes.
think we should think about how these things may be involved in dowsing as part of the sensing mechanism.
Do you foresee any time in the future where this, I mean, as we go along, do you see any time in the future where people go to a practitioner in biofield health or something like that as like a first line of defense, or certainly a large, as similar to like an acupuncturist or something like that, where they go there in addition in complementary therapy?
Well, I think they already exist. Maybe not where you are, but I do this in part, but there are others. I mean, thermography is another way of looking at the biofield, and I know practitioners, physicians who use medical thermography. You walk in, you get thermography, and they decide, you know, what's going on based on irregularities, and they treat you with energy medicine, all different kinds, magnets, pulsing magnets, strong magnets, or sometimes weak ones, and phototherapy, infrared light and colored light, and other modalities instead of giving you drugs. So they're out there, but they're not common. And even an acupuncturist is reading energy, uh, reading the pulses and looking at the tongue. They're reading the energetics of the body. And then they're inserting needles or using moxibustion, the burning of herbs, or cupping around acupoints or acupressure. So they're using energetic means to shift. Then there are biofield practitioners, people who just do Reiki or therapeutic touch, and you can hire them for 30 minutes or an hour. So, I mean, they're definitely out there.
Do you expect that sometime in the future, and this Maria asked this, I think it's kind of funny, but do you expect that sometime in the future, and that you'll have like the tricorder reading for the Star Trek? You know how Bones would wave this thing over their body, and then find out what's wrong with the person by reading their biofield. Is that some sort of a technology that might be sometime in the future? You
I
think?
think so. I think so. And the kind of detectors that we're developing are not on the body. They make no contact with the body. And we can detect information about people at 6 feet away. So I can imagine, if we had a concerted effort with a group of scientists and engineers, we would probably produce such a scanner. But I see it coming down in the future, but I don't know if that's going to be within a decade or 50 years. It depends upon the leadership and the flow of money. Right now, you know, energy medicine is in the doghouse. We have, let's take a look at the medical industry, and it is an industry. It's all about big pharma. Big pharma controls it all. Controls medical procedures, controls the vaccine industry, and all the things going on now with COVID-19, pushing their expensive new drugs when older, reliable drugs for malaria, such as hydroxychloroquine, would do the job. They want to make this, you know, sweep that under the rug and tell you that only a vaccine is going to solve this crisis. I don't agree with this. This is a big business perspective that's going to make their stockholders very rich while people are suffering and dying. So it's very disturbing, really, what's happening with what has happened to our medical system, about our health, to caring more about the stockholders and profits.
As far as distance healing, a lot of we practitioners practice distance healing with Reiki with therapeutic touch. Uh, we practice projecting healing. Um, is that's still working with the biofield? Have you had it done any experiments with that? Is it as beneficial as working next door to
Well,
somebody?
it's not as beneficial according to other people's studies. I haven't personally studied distant healing because, first of all, it's I think the full bandwidth of the biofield is not present. Only certain elements that travel across distances are involved. And as I'm more interested in trying to really ascertain the whole thing and to look at stronger signals, I bring people into the laboratory. But there are meta-analyses of distant healing, and they do not show as strong a result as local healing, being present, patient, and healer. But I haven't really dealt with this realm. The studies are out there.
I understand that. Yeah, thank you. Um, there was one question. I know at the beginning of your talk you said that there was a mixing of the electromagnetic and the I want to I'm not sure. I know you use the word. I'm going to call it ethereal energy, but some sort of a mixture of the two energies where one is strictly electromagnetic and physics, and the other is ethereal or non.
Yes. I was talking about the metaphysical aspect. Let me say this. You know, Maxwell, who brought us Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism, which is still a conventional theory of physics that goes back to the 1800s. He hypothesized an ether, a very subtle material substance through which waves would travel. Historically, the ether was thrown out of science. And I've been taught, and everyone is taught in science now, that waves travel through absolutely no medium, nothing. I think, and I have one paper, you can read it on my website, where we try to bring back a neo-ether because we need something more subtle than the material realm that we have in order to explain a lot of phenomena in science. And the ether was really a good thing that was thrown out by the Michelson-Morley experiment historically. But fields may be multidimensional, and we're only really talking about rather ordinary dimensions in biology and medicine. And so I know there are some theoretical physicists who will invoke 12 dimensions, etc., but they never brought it down to make sense out of it for biology and medicine. So theory out there that might involve metaphysical dimensions like 12-dimensional. So we have levels of being that go beyond, the fourth being time, space. And fields definitely have things across space. It's fascinating. Quantum field potential, for example, an example, how information can flow between and within a system of that break apart. Somehow they stay correlated. I mean, what is a system outside size, a quantum potential function? A lot of people have, shall we say, almost metaphysical ideas into science. And by the way, in physics, they try to eliminate it because they said it was too spooky. It remains. We need action at a distance. That's what the universe. Nobody could eliminate the concept. And when it comes to, I think, understanding life, we of metaphysics thing about life. If you think it's all about a bag of biomolecules, then that's the dominant scientific. At some level, you're an eternal soul, and you have that within your lifetime now. Realm and another foot in the metaphysical realm, and I'm kind of interested in interface. Boxes and this gross materialism that our culture fallen away from church when they divvied up reality and said the church can do physical things and science will only deal with Christian church. But look where it's led us today. Our institutions are precisely because this paradigm has been carried to the ultimate. I mean, it's long. So it's at a level at which I try to is so rampant in our society.
Wow. Well, I don't even want to interrupt. One more question about radionics. And I asked you to practice radionics. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but have you done any work with radionics with your testing?
I haven't done work on radionics per se, but I have to say I'm very involved with the United States Psychotronics Association. I serve on the board and I'm a former president of it. And of course, that organization deals heavily with radionics. We have a number of practitioners and teachers of radionics in that group. That's psychotronics.org is the website. So if you want to know more about radionics, they're the U.S. experts. And we have also conferences, but this year we're not having a conference because of the situation, and we didn't do an online one like you folks did. So radionics is again one of those mysteries how things work, and I think it tends to be more about consciousness than it does about a device. And the devices are often training wheels for conscious intention. Because humans are so used to devices. We practically made technology. So when we use radionics devices, it helps us. It's like to learn to ride a bike. But at some point, then you can throw away the training wheels.
Thank you. And I have a comment here. It says, "Dear Doctor, so many questions among the group. I'm so grateful for you." And I think I can speak for that. And I see people are making comments, but I don't see real questions anymore. If there's any more questions for Dr. Rubik, please ask them. Otherwise, Jane says, "I wish everyone could hear you speak."
Well, I hope you'll come to my workshop this coming Thursday, June 11th. I believe it's at 7:30 Eastern Time. And I'm going to talk more about our technology, especially wireless technology, 4G and 5G. And I'm going to link it also to COVID-19, what's going on, and we'll also address the biofield in response to those energies and more. I've done some original research on 4G and how it impacts us. So I do hope that you'll all tune into it. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you. And Carol Gator says, "Thanks and keep up the great work. And thank you. So
There is
see
a
no
fee
more.
for the workshop. I don't know what it costs, but maybe Tick knows.
$40.
Yeah, it'll be 2 hours.
$40.
And that's all new material. I don't have, I do have some lectures out there online, but this will be unique for you guys. The latest.
Beautiful.
So tune in.
That'd be great. I wouldn't miss it for the world. All right. Well, thank you.
Okay. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. And thank you for a wonderful presentation. Very inspiring. I'm reading. And thank you. I'm seeing a lot of
Yes.
things like that.
Okay.
So,
And send me the chat. I'd love to read it. Thank you.
okay. I'm sure that'll work out just great. Okay. Well,
okay.
Thank you.
Goodbye,
ever so
everybody. And good
much.
luck.
And,
Keep on dowsing.
see you on Thursday.
And healing.
See you on Thursday.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Healthy input.
That much longer, I would finish the presentation. Really? Made lots of progress on that. The border.
Yeah.
No.
She told me workshop on Thursday. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I finished one side. Put in a corner piece.
Takes out of his phone. Start to also.